In this video, we'll be discussing the chapter 1 of political science, that is power sharing. So we'll start with the introduction. When the power does not rest with any one organ of the state, rather it is shared among legislature, executives, judiciary, it is called as power sharing. The two stories from Belgium and Sri Lanka tell us about how democracies handle demand for power sharing. Firstly, we'll discuss the story of Belgium. Belgium is a small country, smaller in size than Haryana, and it lies in the European continent. It has bordered with Netherlands, France, Germany, and Luxembourg. The ethnic composition of Belgium country is very complex. The population composition of Belgium is like 59% population of Belgium they live in the Flemish region and speaks Dutch language. 40% population live in Wallonia region and they speak French language, and remaining 1% of the Belgian population they speak German language. And the situation is totally reversed in the capital city Brussels, where 80% people speak French language while remaining 20% speak Dutch language. In Belgium, the French speaking community was in minority, whereas in the capital city Brussels they were in majority. The French speaking community was relatively richer and powerful. The Dutch got the benefit of education much later. This led to the tension between the Dutch speaking and the French speaking communities during the year 1950s to 1960s. Now, the second case study is of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is an island country near India. Sri Lanka also has diverse population composition like Belgium. In Sri Lanka, Sinhala community was consisting of 74% population, whereas Tamil speakers were of 18%. Among the Tamils, there were two subgroups, Tamil natives and the Indian Tamils. The Tamil natives are called Sri Lankan Tamils, which were consisting of 13% population. The rest, whose forefather came from India as plantation worker, are called Indian Tamils. Most of the Sinhala speaking people are Buddhists, while most of the Tamils are Hindus or Muslims. Christian are about 7%. Sinhalese enjoyed majority and composed its will on the entire country. When Sri Lanka emerged as an independent country in the year 1948, the leaders of the Sinhala community tried to dominate and took some measures of majoritarian, such as recognition of the Sinhala as the official languages, and preference was given to the Sinhala community in terms of education and jobs. As we have learnt that Sinhala community sought to secure dominance over the government by the virtue of their majority, so in the year 1956 an act was passed to recognize Sinhala as the official language, and a new constitution was forced, and according to that the state shall protest and foster the Buddhism religion. All these coming measures, one after another, gradually increased the feeling of alienation among the Sri Lankan Tamils and the Indian Tamils. As a result, the relation between the Sinhala and the Tamil communities strained over time. The Sri Lankan Tamils launched parties and the struggles for their demand, like they want Tamil language also the official language of the country, or they also want the regional autonomy, and they also want some privileges or the preferences were given to them in terms of education and job. But their demand for more autonomy to provinces were denied. The distrust between both the communities turned into widespread conflict. It soon turned into the civil war. The civil war caused a terrible setback to the social, cultural, and the economic life of the country. The Belgium leaders recognized the existence of regional and the cultural diversities. They amended their constitution 4 times so as to work out an innovative arrangement for everyone to live together in peace and harmony. There was sharing of power between the Dutch and the French community both in the central government, state government, and in the community government. They followed a policy of accommodation. This helped to avoid civil war and the division of country on the linguistic lines. On the other hand, the Sinhalese, who were in the majority in Sri Lanka as compared to the Tamils, followed a policy of majoritarianism and adopted a series of measures to establish Sinhala supremacy by passing an act of 1956. This measure alienated the Tamils, leading to civil war between both the communities. Is power sharing desirable in democracy? So, as we know, power sharing is a concept of providing a share of power in the government into different communities or regions. Under power sharing, the people and the leaders of the nation respect the feeling and the interest of different communities. Right? So, the topic is why power sharing is desirable in democracy, or we can say, why is power sharing necessary in democracy? A simple terms, why is power sharing good for democracy? So, there are two reasons. First is moral reason. So moral reason is the spirit of democracy. Like what is your moral duty? Your moral duty is to study, right? Whereas on the other hand, prudential reasons are totally based on the careful calculation of gains and the losses. Like for example, we have studied two stories, the story of Belgium and the story of Sri Lanka. In the story of Belgium, we have studied there are different communities on the basis of language, like the Dutch speaking community, the French speaking community, right? And in Belgium, when the government was formed, there was equal representation of all the communities in the government, right? Which leads to the better outcomes. Whereas in Sri Lanka, we can say that there are different communities like the Sinhala community, the Indian Tamils, the Sri Lankan Tamils. Here in Sri Lanka, the majority community, that was the Sinhala community, they were forming the government, they were running the government. The majority community was in the power and they were undermining the rights of the minority community, which leads to the conflict into the country, right? And which creates the disturbance or the stress in the country, and it also leads to the civil war. We have studied this topic, right? Now we can, and the next point is it helps to reduce the possibility of conflict between social groups. But if the power share is in a particular nation is equally shared, then it reduces the chances or the possibilities of the conflict, like as we have studied in the Belgium story, where there was the equal representation of all the communities into the government. Whereas in Sri Lanka, the majority community was forming the government and they were favoring their community, right? And they were undermining or they were ignoring or denying the rights of the minority community, and which leads to the civil war, right? Now the next is it increases the unity of the government because it brings ruin to the majority. But when the power is shared on the basis of when the power is shared equally and there is equal representation of all the communities, it will reduce the chances of the conflict and it also increases the unity of the government, like imposing the will of the majority community over the minority. It may look like an attractive option but only in the short run, whereas in the long term, or we can say in the long term, it undermines the unity of the nation. So in simple terms, we can say the power sharing often brings ruin to the majority as well. Now the moral reasons. Moral reasons upholds the spirit of democracy, In a truly democratic setup, the citizens do have a stake in the government. Like in India, the citizens can come together to debate and criticize the policies and the decisions of the government, which in turns put pressure on the government to rethink its policies and reconsider its decision. Okay, bacha, so these are the moral reasons, and the example of moral reason we can say the decentralization of power, the formation of the state government or the local government. So these are the example of the moral reasons. Discussing the forms of power sharing. So as we have discussed, why is power sharing good for democracy, right? Now we'll be discussing at what level or how the power is shared into different levels. So the first one is horizontal distribution of power, second is vertical distribution of power, third is power shared among different social groups. Now the fourth is power shared among various pressure groups and movements. Now we'll be discussing this one by one. So the first is horizontal distribution of power. Okay, so in this we can say power is shared among different organs of the government such as the legislature, executive and judiciary. And in this we can say it allows different organs of the government to be placed at the same level. Okay, and in this the different organs exercise their power based on the concept of separation of the power, like such as the legislature, they makes laws, executives they enforce these laws, and the judiciary they interpret these laws. Okay, so in this we can say that uh, all the level of the organ they are placed at the same level, no one is superior and no one can exercise unlimited powers. To ensure this, each organ checks the other organ. Okay, and because of that, this horizontal division of power is also known as the concept of check and balance. Now the next level of power sharing is vertical power sharing. So, in this, we can say the division of power involving the higher and the lower levels of government, and this is known as vertical division of power. For example, as we have studied the story of Belgium, there was a central government for the country, then we are having this state government, and then we are having the community government. Similarly, in India, at national level we can say there is a union or central government, then there is a state government also, and different parts of the world we can say the state government is also known as provincial or the regional government. And in India there is one more level, the third level of government, that is the local level, and it includes the municipality and the panchayat. Okay, and such a system is we can say called as the federal form of government. Power shared between different social groups. In this we can say various weak social groups are representative in legislature or the administration through various reservation. This gives the various social groups a voice and power which might not have been given in other types of government. Next is power shared among different political parties, pressure groups and movements. So there are various political groups in the society, like the political parties, pressure groups and the public interest groups, which have a significant influence over the decision making and law making process in a democracy. Sometimes the political parties form an alliance and participate in the direct power sharing process when they form a coalition government.